Brandon Swanson was born on January 30th, 1989, and by 19 years old, he was a 5-foot student at Minnesota West Community and Technical College. On May 14th, 2008, Brandon set out to celebrate the end of that year's classes with his friends. He attended a couple of local gatherings that evening, first in Lind, near his home in Marshall, then in Canby, roughly 35 miles from his own home. Brandon's friends would later report that while they saw him drinking, he didn't seem drunk. He left Canby sometime after midnight to drive home, a trip he made practically every day as part of his commute to and from school. But that night, instead of taking Minnesota State Highway 68, the most direct route between Canby and Marshall, Brandon decided to drive through a rural area, farming roads, and perhaps to avoid the police. Brandon swerved into a ditch near a farming field, and because his car wheels were now elevated, he couldn't get any traction to drive back out. Around 1:54 a.m., he called his parents asking for a ride home. He told him he was near Lind, about 10 minutes away from their home in Marshall. His parents headed out to pick him up, staying connected on the call as they drove, but they found nothing but pitch darkness. "Don't you see me?" Brandon asked, as he and both his parents flashed their lights to signify their presence. At one point, Brandon hung up and his mother called him back, apologizing. Brandon told his parents that he would just walk back to his friend's house in Lind. So, his father dropped his wife off at home and continued toward Lind while remaining on the phone with his son. As he walked into the darkness, Brandon suggested his parents meet him in the parking lot of a popular nightclub in Lind and decided to cut across a field as a shortcut. Brandon's father heard his son walking along, then abruptly shout, "Oh shit," as the call dropped out. It would be the last words anyone heard from Brandon Swanson. His parents repeatedly called his phone, but it went straight to voicemail, and for the rest of the night, with the help of his friends, everyone searched the rural areas, endless grave roads, and farmland in vain. The next morning at 6:30 a.m., Brandon's mother, Annette, called the Lind police to report her son missing. The police responded by saying he was a teenage college kid and it wasn't abnormal for a young adult to be out all night after finishing college classes. Deputies had advised them to just be patient and wait for him to return on his own. One officer reportedly told them it's his right to be missing. As the hours stretched by, Brandon still hadn't been found. Local officers eventually joined the search and then requested a county-wide search team response. Brandon's phone was still functioning, and police found the location of his last call to the nearest cell tower. It was in Porter, about 20 miles from where he thought he was. Police decided to concentrate their search around the Porter area, and Brandon's green Chevy Lumina sedan was found later that afternoon. The car was stuck in a ditch off of Lyon Lincoln Road between Porter and Taunton, but officers investigating found no signs of foul play. An extensive search involving police dogs, air surveillance, and hundreds of volunteers began. The K-9 unit led officers roughly 3 miles away from the ditch to the Yellow Medicine River, which was flowing high and fast, before they lost his scent. No personal property or clothing belonging to him was discovered on the route to the river, or alongside the 2-mile stretch of the river in the area, which takes roughly 6 hours to walk. Over a 3-week period, search and cadaver dogs found nothing. Brandon had simply vanished into the rural farmland and backroads of Minnesota. In later years of 2008, an emergency support services, a search and rescue organization based in Minneapolis, identified a 140 square mile area of interest and focused their search there. However, some farmers refused to allow the search canines onto their land, particularly during planting and harvest season, leaving significant geographic holes in their search for Brandon, and the issues still persist. Before his disappearance, Brandon had no history of mental illness. He was generally healthy and had no pre-existing conditions. Some people believed he may have fallen into the river and washed downstream, but investigators thought that was unlikely, as his body was never recovered. Likewise, if he had fallen into the river, managed to climb back up onto dry land, and eventually succumbed to hypothermia, a cadaver dog would also have likely picked up on his scent. Brandon's mother was also doubtful her son had drowned, according to CNN, as one of the tracking canines had followed his scent from his car down to a long gravel track toward an abandoned farm. The 3-mile trail also led to the river, where initially the dog jumped into the water, then jumped back out and continued tracking along another gravel trail until it was too late to get his scent. It also seems unlikely that he would have staged his own disappearance, as he had been trying to meet up with his parents that night. One theory suggested that he had experienced a mental breakdown or had died by suicide, but his parents said that during their last phone call with him, Brandon had sounded coherent and did not seem to be impaired. On July 1, 2009, a bill called Brandon's Law was passed in Minnesota. The law, for which Brandon's parents advocated, requires authorities to immediately take a missing persons report and begin an investigation, regardless of the missing person's age. The couple's motivation was to prevent other families from having to experience the same obstacles they encountered while trying to initiate the search for their missing son. More than 15 years have passed, and searches by emergency support services and the Yellow Medicine County Sheriff's Office continue when harvesting seasons allow. Search teams also have to contend with the Minnesota winds, which have further complicated their efforts. Search managers have called the area where Brandon went missing the toughest terrain there is, with the exception of Canada. In fall of 2021, the Yellow Medicine River dried up as a result of a drought, and law enforcement carried out an excavation that produced nothing. Law enforcement continues to gather tips which have kept his case from going cold. To date, no physical evidence related to Brandon Swanson has ever been recovered, including his cell phone, car keys, or clothing, and all his parents have left other memories and that last chilling phone call. Sheriff Wallen stated in 2023 that tips are still coming in. Within the last year, he said the Sheriff's Office and Bureau of Criminal Apprehension have received new information pertaining to the night he went missing and the events leading up to his disappearance. This included third-hand claims that Brandon had got into an argument with someone around the time he was last seen. However, none of these tips have been confirmed.